Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and let's go ahead and get week 45 of today's Tolkien Times underway with Mailbag Monday. In today's Mailbag, we have a question from Bede in Sydney, Australia, who asks a question I don't think I'd ever really thought about before. Did Sauron know or recognize Saruman or Gandalf, either as merely embodied Maiar or as their actual Maiar selves, particularly given that both Saruman and Sauron were Maiar of Aulë? Well, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, after all. All three of the people in question here were Maiar spirits, and we read of the Maiar in Valaquenta in the Silmarillion. With the Valar came other spirits whose being also began before the world, of the same order as the Valar, but of less degree. These are the Maiar, the people of the Valar, and their servants and helpers. Their number is not known to the elves, and few have names in any of the tongues of the children of Ilúvatar. For though it is otherwise in Aman, in Middle-earth the Maiar have seldom appeared in form visible to elves and men. I want to draw attention to the line, their number is not known to the elves. Just want to kind of point that out. Now, with that addressed, let's see what Valaquenta has to say about two of these three. Wisest of the Maiar was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience. Now, Olorin is, of course, Gandalf's name when he was a Maia, though we've already talked about the fact that as an incarnate being, he doesn't recall everything from when he was in Valinor. Then we get a bit about the big bad. Among those of Melkor's servants that have names, the greatest was that spirit whom the Eldar called Sauron, or Gorthar the Cruel. In his beginning he was of the Maiar of Aulë, and he remained mighty in the lore of that people. In all the deeds of Melkor the Morgoth upon Arda, in his vast works and in the deceits of his cunning, Sauron had a part, and was only less evil than his master in that for long he served another and not himself. But in after years he rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. Now, there is nothing in Valaquenta about Saruman, or Curumo, as he would have been known in Valinor. So for him, we have to go to the chapter on the Astari in Unfinished Tales, where we read that he was chosen by Aulë, and possibly obliged to take Iwendil, that's Radagast, to please Yavanna, wife of Aulë. Now, Christopher Tolkien says that each Istar was chosen by each Vala for his innate characteristics, perhaps even that they were members of the people of that Vala in the same sense as is said of Sauron, that in his beginning he was of the Maiar of Aulë. So even though it's not entirely clear, let's go ahead and assume that yes, Saruman wasn't just chosen by Aulë, he was actually of the people of Aulë. Now with that data, do we have any idea that Sauron knew who either of them were? I mean, if Aulë's people numbered in the dozens, it does seem likely that Saruman and Sauron would know of one another. But here's the thing, we don't know how many Maiar there were. So it could also be like finding out that a neighbor of yours just moved there from California, and you say, oh, I have a cousin who lives in California. Do you know so-and-so? No, there are almost 40 million people here. How would I know one? Now, granted, it seems unlikely that there were ever 40 million Maiar working under Aulë. But the point is that there might certainly have been enough that Sauron and Saruman never had lunch in the break room at the same time. You know what I mean? But let's assume, even for the sake of argument, that Sauron and Saruman knew each other during their time under Aulë. Would that necessarily translate into the Third Age? Recall that the Astari first appeared in Middle-earth about the year 1000 of the Third Age, and that around that time, men saw them seldom and heeded them little. Now, what was going on with Sauron around Third Age 1000? He had only just begun to take shape again, trying to rebuild his physical body after his defeat and the loss of the One Ring, as we read in the Astari. But as the shadow of Sauron began to grow and take shape again, they, talking about the Astari, became more active and sought ever to contest the growth of the shadow. Okay, that means they were already here in Middle-earth around the time the shadow began to grow and take shape. Hence, while they know about Sauron, I mean, after all, that's their entire reason for being in Middle-earth, is to oppose Sauron, it seems unlikely that Sauron would know about their arrival when he's still trying to form a physical presence. Then I think we have to recall that only a few of the elves knew about the origins of the Astari, Círdan, Galadriel, and Elrond perhaps. Why would Sauron know about their origin? To him, they'd seem like meddlesome old men, not spirits that are peers of his own. But the clincher is in Morgoth's ring, in a piece called Notes on Motives in the Silmarillion. Here we learn that it's not whether Sauron knew Saruman, it's that he understood him. And here are some really choice quotes. Sauron had in fact been very like Saruman, and so still understood him quickly and could guess what he would be likely to think and do even without the aid of Palantiri or of spies, whereas Gandalf eluded and puzzled him. Now later, after suggesting that Sauron likely deluded himself into thinking that Iluvatar had abandoned Arda, we read this. It would appear that Sauron interpreted the change of the world at the downfall of Númenor, when Amon was removed from the physical world, in this sense. Valar and elves were removed from effective control, and men under God's curse and wrath. If he thought about the Astari, especially Saruman and Gandalf, he imagined them as emissaries from the Valar, seeking to establish their lost power again and colonize Middle-earth as a mere effort of defeated imperialists without knowledge or sanction of Eru. That's huge. But then we're told that that cynicism would have appeared fully justified as it relates to Saruman, obviously. But after that, there's this beautiful nugget. Gandalf, he did not understand. But certainly Sauron had already become evil and therefore stupid enough to imagine that his different behavior was due simply to weaker intelligence and lack of firm, masterful purpose. He was only a rather cleverer Radagast. Cleverer because it is more profitable, more productive of power, to become absorbed in the study of people than of animals. So, while I would suggest that Sauron would not have recognized Saruman, let alone Gandalf, as specific Maiar spirits that he knew or might have known from Valinor, at the end of the day, it wouldn't matter if he did. It does seem clear that if he thought about them as Tolkien said, he would know that they were emissaries from the Valar, but then he'd promptly underestimate them, especially Gandalf. He had already become evil and therefore stupid enough. It's going to live rent-free in my brain henceforth, and I might have to use that at an appropriate time. Folks, that wraps that up for Mailbag Monday. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, please email it to bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let him know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Now, if you'd like to help me keep making this show better, please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get a bonus episode every week, mailbag priority, and more. Join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe on podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.